got to look at the time so that I don't speak too long. When I get up to speak, I just go on and on because there's so much to speak about. But we're here in this building to begin the studies of Indigenous spirituality. And when I first heard about it, what was happening, I said to myself, what is this? What is it? What does it mean to me as an Aboriginal person? I did a lot of traveling in my younger days and visited many Aboriginal peoples across Canada and overseas, internationally. I listened to their stories. I listened to their stories of their spiritual beliefs. Where did it come from? Where did this belief come from? Did it came with the Europeans across the ocean? Or was it already here before the advent of the Europeans? I can only speak for the listener. I'm sure there's stories galore out there with respect to other Aboriginal people about their spiritual beliefs. And no doubt that time will come when their stories will be told. God is called by many names across Canada, across the Americas. He's called the Supreme Being, the Life Giver, or the Giver of Life, the Great Spirit, the Creator, and the list of names goes on and on. So where did our spiritual beliefs come from, originate from? It was here before the advent of the Europeans. Unfortunately, when that day came, it was misunderstood. Nobody came to study about the spiritual beliefs of Aboriginal people then. They were so much interested in the land. And so that was pushed aside for many years. First contact occurred in our nation around 1780, when members of our nation first made contact with the men that came in these great sailing ships, observatory India, around 1780. That's about 230 years ago. That to me was yesterday. It happened yesterday. I think my great-grandparents actually saw the first European that walked on our land, just like some of you here. They saw those people. We have many stories about how the world came to be. We have a creation story. We have a flood story. We have reincarnation beliefs that tell us people are able to come back once they have passed on. We also celebrate the beginning of the new harvest season. And the first crescent moon will hang if you look up in the sky Friday or Saturday. You're going to see this crescent sliver of a moon. It's called in the Tupstab of the year, in the shape of a wooden spoon. And it signals the beginning of the harvest season of our people. The first to make his appearance is the Oligan. small little fish about that big. Sometimes he's so full of grease you can hold him up and look right through its body. And our culture revolves around the arrival of this little fish. Sometimes it's called the Savior fish, because this month is called Hoplats. In this, all the months have names, just the names. This month is called Hoplats. If you go on our land, you're going to see carpets of pine needles strewn all over, blown out by the wind. That's what it means, that Hoplats, blown out by the wind, the north wind. We have a very spiritual place on our territory. And the place is called Atney Oak. It's still there today, but located between the village of Kidwinchit and Lachtanza. The story says that many of our people went to this place. It says that like this wall where the river runs by, and said that the mountain was painted with the crest designs of our people. And that those designs, that particular painting in our nation is called Kawach. Kawach. And you see it in front of the same type of painting in our old community hall in Kidakan. Kawach, it's called. A spiritual place. Many people came and they fasted outside of this place, awaiting a vision, seeking a vision that would give meaning and direction to their lives. Many went away not satisfied, but there were those people who received the vision. The story says that if your vision was granted, a man would come out of the mountain and he would speak to you and tell you what your purpose in life would be, what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. That place is still there. We now also have stories of heaven. Our elders, I listened to them talk when I was younger, and they spoke of this great city in the sky, and they called it Wielanta Duda Tsullaha. You know it as heaven, this place. If you attended a memorial service in our nation today, you're going to see something that may be unusual to you. And this is when different families, different houses come together and pay homage to the deceased person. They call this person by name, he or she. They call him or her by name. And they say to this person, Amen. Amen. They're imploring this person to walk slowly, to walk with honor, to walk with great pride in the proud tradition of our forebears as that individual's spiritual journey begins. The story said there's a path that leads to this great city in the sky that one must walk after life here on earth has ended. And the people who speak implore this person, he or she, to walk that path, the very marked path our ancestors have walked for thousands and thousands of years. We have no word for goodbye in our language. When people stand over the grave of their loved one, they don't say goodbye because goodbye is so final. It's final. What our people say to the deceased person. We will see you again. That's what he said. We will see you again. And that's one of the spiritual beliefs of our nation. We're going to meet those people who have departed generations and centuries ago. We're going to meet them. I know I will. There's a medical description of death. What happens? What happens when a person dies? Your heart stops beating, your breathing stops, and the organs in your body begin to die because of a lack of oxygen. In a few minutes, your brain begins to die because of a lack of oxygen. Shortly after that, all human consciousness ceases to exist. And you have to ask yourself, well, what happens then? What happens then? Do we go somewhere? Or is this all there is to life? Is this all there is to life? Theologians, on the other hand, tell us that if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in His Son, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost, you will die. You're going to burn forever in the lake of fire. Your soul will die. That's what we're doing. Interestingly enough, the ancient stories that I heard, they didn't speak of this great lake of fire. I didn't hear it repeated over and over and over again. I didn't hear that. He merely said that if when you die, you're going to get your just reward. But however you may have lived your life, your reward will be based on what you did with this life. We have an interesting person in our many stories. His name is Transon. Oh, what an interesting story. My mother used to tell us, her children, that if the story of Transon was told, it would require more than a week for the storyteller to tell what this man did. What he did. Starting when people wake up in the morning until they go to bed at night, repeated the next day and the next day. He said more than a week. We have recorded stories of Transon today, but they're only a very, very small amount. Not even the tip of a needle, I would say, compared to what I heard in my younger days. So who was this man, Transon? Where did he come from? The ancient stories tell us that he came down from heaven, and landed at the headwaters of the Mass River, Mahon-Nissens. And Mahon-Nissens is a very interesting place. Today, some of you know that particular area as the sacred headwaters. This is where the headwaters of the Nass River begins. flows south until it empties into the Pacific. And the Stikine River, in the same location, begins its journey and runs to the opposite direction until it too empties into the ocean. Not too far from the same location, you can see the Skeena Mountains, the headwaters of the Skeena River. I know because I've been there, I've seen it. I stood on Nash Lake, and the beginning of the Nash River is about that deep. You wouldn't even get your ankles wet if you waded across. The lake is so pristine. You could be on top of the lake and you could see down 30, 40, 40 feet. It's so clear. Unpolluted waters. This is the area that they're thinking of drilling for oil and gas. Imagine what would happen to our land downriver from that location. That was the case. We have, as I indicated earlier, a flood story. Oh, the old story says a person came into each one of our communities and told the people to prepare because the rains will come. And the mountains will be covered with water. To prepare ropes that will hold the canoes, to prepare food. But you know there's only one story in the Bible that says Noah and his family were the only survivors of that great flood. We have 4 mountains in our traditional territory. Which members of our nation survived that great flood. And those families today still relate those survival stories in our feast halls. When some of the canoes drifted away, blown away from the mountain to where the sun rises, or some canoes drifted away to where the sun sets. Those survival stories are still being told today. I know because our family has a survival story. We even know the name of the canoe in which members of our family survived. Malva, the name of the canoe, Malva. My mother said, don't forget the name. Don't forget the name. Don't forget to tell the story of what happened in ancient times. They were told how to prepare for the flood. When the rains came and never stopped, the mountains were covered up. I know I stood on a mountain across Gibbon City, almost 6,000 feet up in the air. And I looked down north toward the valley of the Nass. And I tried to imagine in my mind's eye what those people were looking at that time. I said, my God, water everywhere you look. I couldn't believe it. You have to stand on top of the mountain to know what a flood story is all about. To know what those people, our ancestors, went through. They even have stories of the rainbow, just like in the Bible. If you go to the Museum of Civilization today, and you go to the West Coast area, you're going to see a totem pole there. It's called the Rainbow Pole. It belongs to the House of Missags. And on top of that pole stands a man on top of the tail of a killer whale, and he's holding the rainbow in his hand. That totem pole tells the story of the great flood that our people experienced. One of our stories says that our people lived in a world of semi-darkness in the beginning. So what caused the darkness? Was it some catastrophic event that happened on the other side of the world? Caused the clouds to turn black, block out the sun? We even have a village called, named to commemorate this great event that happened. The name above Old Dams, 2 or 3 miles north of Dams. The place is called Winstead. Winstead. It means village of darkness, where our people were when the sun faded from view. I need a drink here. If I'm talking too long, everybody start coughing and visiting around. When I left Alert Bay in 1949, St. Michael's Residential School, I went back to our community in Indigenous City. I was there for 6 years. I forgot my language. I had to turn to my parents, my mother, and my father, and they re-taught me the language. I still speak it today. Well, I forgot who I was as a person. We used to watch the old cowboy movies in those days. Oh, cowboys ran in, galloped into the community, shoot all the Indians without reloading his 6-gun. I said, how could he do that? How could he do that? The beginning of the Niskat prayer goes like this in Niskat. Kharaf Gadam, I Gadam, Samam, Nudat, and Sunlaha, Naknah, Higina. The almost literal interpretation of the beginning of that prayer that I heard so many, many times, being offered up by our elders. It means, Almighty and everlasting Chief, who dwells in the heavens, hear our prayer. We also have what my late colleague Bertrude McKay referred to as the edicts of life, that thou shalt not. Words that have been passed down to our people, generation upon generation, hundreds and hundreds of years. When you read them, some of them are recorded today. The first thing that comes to your mind will be, it sounds like the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not. Get out of the way of this. Get out of the way of this. That's what I thought when I first read the written, translated words about thou shalt not. Get out of the way of this. And my first thoughts were, it comes from the Bible. But those words have been uttered for hundreds and hundreds of years, long before the missionaries arrived on our land, our land. We call God by name. His name is Samavik Amdigata. Samavik Amdigata. He has the most revered name in our nation. I asked my father, what does the name mean? What does this name mean? And he told me that its meaning has been lost over time. And he said to me, the closest thing that I can translate to you what this name meant, a most kind person. Yeah, I'm going to get him some moment. A most kind person. One of the interpretations of the name. Our people also believe that there's a spiritual being that lives inside each one of us, inside each one of you. We call that person Alton, the Alton Get. You know him as the soul of man. The soul of man. He lives inside each one of us. When life ends, this person begins his spiritual journey. When I visited my father, he used to make us stand in the stern of the boat when he was picking up gimlet. And sometimes the waves would come over the stern of the boat. And he would say to my brother Benny and I, get out of the get out of the do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And we're standing there, water coming over us, in the stern of the gimlet. He said, do not be afraid. Oh, I heard him repeat that phrase many, many times. Do not be afraid. Our people, like so many Indigenous and Aboriginal people across Canada, experienced the smallpox. A conservative estimate of our nation, a very, very conservative estimate of our population, is around 15,000 people that live throughout the territory. And when the disease came, it almost wiped out our nation. DIA did the census in 1918 and indicated that there were less than 800 of our people living on the land at that time. Less than 800. I indicate that we celebrate the new harvest season. Holiday, Tuksa Holiday. That moon is going to hang this weekend, according to the calendar. The first sliver of a moon that hangs in February, hangs upside down like this. You can barely see it. Called Tuksa Holiday. It's in the shape of a wooden spoon. And people in ancient times would go shouting around the communities, Hawike, Hawike, which means it's in the shape of a wooden spoon. Hawike. We say Hawike today, slightly different. We have people who study the movement of the heavens, the movement of the sun, the comings and goings of the moon, the movement of the stars, so that they would be able to predict when the different harvest seasons would begin. With the coming of the Europeans with their calendars and timepieces, those old traditions of our people slowly faded away. Not so in ancient times. There were people who studied the phases, the movement of the heavens, to tell the population when the harvest of the different species would begin. Each one of them has a name. Each month has a Niska name. It indicates what can be harvested on that particular month. brings me to another spiritual belief of our nation. You know it as reincarnation, the ability to come back after death has occurred. And the story of reincarnation begins like this. When I'm traveled with you, living with sorrow. He knew you were coming. That's why he had to leave. Starts with the departure of our elders and the birth of a new baby coming back into the earth. Which means to arrive somewhere. Which means to come back. And our people firmly believe in this. They would say, now quickly, who came back? They will quickly, I will come back. Before my wife and I got married, and her mother had died of tuberculosis, and she was adopted and taken in by their uncle, Benjamin Monroe. Benjamin was a musician. He was a conductor of a 52-piece military-sized band named Independence. But Benjamin had a habit, he had a trait that was noticeable. He loved to whistle. Everywhere he went, walking around, he would whistle. Sometimes he'd be seated in a peace stall and his whistle would come out. People would smile around. Sometimes when he was sitting in church, he would whistle. And people would smile around. So he always told my wife, Adele, that if he came back, he was going to come back through her. But he will be reborn. And as young people, it came in one year, went out the other, and we forgot about that. The children began coming into the world. One of them, my oldest son, Joe Jr. And there was nothing unusual about him. But he was about 6 years old when he started to whistle. And he would walk around our house whistling. And Dad looked at me and she said, "It's Benjamin. He's come back. He's come back." There are many traits that human beings exhibit and show habits, but we're so busy with surviving every day, the survival game, we fail to notice these traits and habits when they appear briefly. It doesn't stay long, it's just a brief amount of time and it's gone, disappears. And the person who shows those traits never even knew he or she had it. One of my old school colleagues who lives in one of our matriarchs, she was telling me the story of her grandson. She said he pulled the chair up to the window, climbed up and looked out the window, and pointed at the house across the street and said, "That's my house." Oh, this woman couldn't believe what this child was saying. And she said, "I remember his grandfather. That's what he said he was going to do. He's going to come back." And this little boy said to her, "That house belongs to me. It's my house." We used to bring our children to my parents' house. They were just a few weeks old, and Oh, my mother would have a great time. She would hold the baby up in the air like this and talk to the baby. Nanis means, who are you? Who are you? And she would sit there and have a conversation with the baby, all by herself, talking to the baby. Because she knew one of the spiritual beliefs of our people, the ability to come back. Sometimes even the terminally ill people who are on the verge of departing this world begin to see their grandparents sitting around the room. Maybe, just maybe, they're there to help in a transition that is about to happen. I know my nephew who showed that trait. He said, I see my grandfather. He's sitting over there. He's sitting over there. When I first saw the movie, and I'm sure most of you have seen that movie, that happens so fast that the person doesn't even believe that he or she is dying, still walking around. And I said to myself, my God, this is our this is our story. The ability to move objects, what was depicted on that movie. Lost my water container. I don't hear any coughing, so I'll just continue. We observed the great salmon runs of the province. One of them that surprised everyone this year was the return of the sockeye salmon to the Fraser River. Caught people completely off guard. Completely off guard. And same thing happens in Skeena and Nass. These great returns of food, to me, are reincarnation events that we fail to see. You watch the Discovery Channel on the great migrations on the plains of Africa and elsewhere in the country. But you don't equate it with the ability to come back. And yet, that's what it is. Animals are reborn. They regenerate themselves and come back. Man continues in his quest today to remake the world into what he thinks it should be. And we see that today. The weather patterns are changing. Medicine is being changed. Crops are failing to appear. We even hear that human beings will be cloned sometime in the foreseeable future. Man's attempt to remake the world into what he thinks it should be. Which brings me to the wearing of this blanket. I have two blankets. This is the blanket that I wear during our cultural performances. It has the crest of my family on the back. The beaver design. Everything I wear is beaver. Beaver design on my vest, my dance apron, my boots, the staff that I carry symbolizes the beaver, the main crest of our family. But there's another blanket that our people wear. It's called Guisalite. Guisalite. Most of you know that blanket in what it's called today, a chip cat blanket. The Huisalite is a sacred blanket. It tells me that I'm wearing the robes and the spirit of my forebears when I put this blanket on. I'm wearing it. Similar in nature to the robes royalty wears. Similar in nature to what bishops wear today, symbols of spiritual beliefs. We also have a staff. It's called Caracol Souvenirs. Again, this terminology that doesn't quite live up to what this staff is meant to be. You know it as a talking stick. The person who holds that staff is given the authority to do things for his people, to speak on behalf of his people. That is the way it is. You watch it on CPAC at the beginning of debate in the House of Commons, and this man walks in with a mace. He's carrying the mace. He's a decorated warrior, this man carries that mace, carries it, places it before debate begins, dealing with the business of the nation. The same thing occurs in the provincial parliament. The mace is carried in, and it's laid to rest until the business of the province has been done. To me, that's what talking stick means. Happens to what it is. That's what it means to me. There's an interesting story about blankets, crests that we wear. In ancient times, my father would tell us, our ancestors noticed something peculiar that happens when people get married. When you marry too close within the family circle, physical and mental disabilities begin to appear, and they never leave for the life of the person. And so they spoke amongst themselves, how can we prevent this from happening? How can we prevent this from happening? And they created the system that we have today in our nation, the crest system, the main crest of our nation. It is forbidden, one of the strictest laws in our nation, for an individual to marry into his own tribe, similar in nature to marrying your own sister. Oh, how you were banned from the community, banned from the nation, if you did that. And its main purpose was to keep the blood separated, to keep the genes that you and I pass on to our children, keep those genes separated. Bear in mind, these people knew nothing about science that we know today, about genetics. They didn't know, but they observed observation over many, many, many years. Told them that this would happen if they failed to recognize what is happening within the ranks of our nation. So who's going to erase all of these things from the memory of our people? Who's going to erase it? The church tried and failed. The government tried with their social engineering, and they failed miserably. Who's going to erase the ancient stories of our people, handed down from one generation to the next? Unfortunately, history is written by dominant society. From biblical times until today, history is written by dominant society. And Hollywood, unfortunately, plays a role because it completely distorts the portrayal of our people that you see in the movies. Completely distorts it. They painted our people with one stroke of the brush, but everybody's going to be the same. One stroke of the brush. Despite the tragic history of our people, despite the tragic history that we're dealing with today, we're still here, I'm still here, my people are still here, other tribal nations are still here. We're survivors of the great march towards progress. We're survivors. We're changed, but we're still here, and we plan to remain where we are. So what does it mean to me? It displays to me the strength of the human spirit to survive even insurmountable odds. That's what it means to me. Everything's been tried against you, but you're still there, we're still here. Man, unfortunately, is a very covetous creature. Oh, he covets everything he sees. Oh, how he coveted our land. He laid eyes on our land. He takes without asking. Takes without asking. God, in his great mercy, gave land to many, many peoples around the world. They hold those lands today. He gave us the lands upon which we live today. Today we will hold in perpetuity in a mass valley, a portion of our territory. To me, that land is our holy land. It's our holy land. God gave that land to us. In reading the Bible, I don't see any paragraphs that tell of a new world. It speaks of the old world, Europe, Africa, the Middle East. It speaks of those worlds. But I don't see any mention of the new world, our land that we live on today, the Americas, North America, South America. I don't see that anywhere. Maybe it was meant to be like that. Maybe it was meant to be like that, that would enable our people to survive against all odds. Oh, I'm sure that the stories that will be told during the life of the institution that's been created, the degrees that will be offered by those people who still remember what they saw and heard when they were young, what they experienced. Because our people do have a story to tell. Spiritually, we do have a spiritual story to tell, and maybe that's what this institution has been finally able to do, to enable that to happen, those stories to be told, stories that survive, stories of the human spirit to survive against all seemingly impossible odds. I wish to thank those who gave me the privilege to say a few words to you this evening. Oh, it's thank you. Thank you. Father can always say to me, "You've been awake all your life to tell a story. And when that time comes, you will tell it. You will tell that story." And this is part of that story. It's a small part, a very, very small part of the spiritual beliefs of our people. Oh, it's easy. Thank you very much.